Hello YouTubers, you're on the 40th episode of The Final Cut. My name is Frederick Lopez and today I'm going to be going over my review and thoughts of 1980's Friday the 13th. Yes, Mrs. Voorhees was a killer in this, not Jason. And briefly, I'm going to go over the cast, crew, and a brief synopsis. Friday the 13th is directed by Sean S. Cunningham. Stars Betsy Palmer as Mrs. Voorhees, Adrienne King as Alice, Janine Taylor as Marcy, Robbie Morgan as Annie, Kevin Bacon as Jack, with Tom Savini doing special makeup effects. Friday the 13th takes place during one summer at Camp Crystal Lake, where a group of young counselors begin to get ready to lead campers. However, an unknown assailant is murdering each of the camp counselors one by one while they are trying to reopen a summer camp, which years before was the site of a child's drowning. Yeah, anyway, that's who stars in Friday the 13th, and that's what it's about. The little boy who drowned was Jason Voorhees, and pretty much it involves an unknown assailant. Now, this will contain spoilers, and as you may know, Mrs. Voorhees is the killer. She's killing the campers there at Camp Crystal Lake after what they did years before bullying Jason. She's taking it out on each and every camper that visits there. So what are my thoughts? Personally, I'm more of a Nightmare on Elm Street fan, but I do respect Jason for what it is. And of course, this was made because of the success of Halloween from 1978. It does borrow a lot from Halloween, but it just takes it a step further into the direction of a lot of raunch, sex, gore, and violence that will later on shape the decade of the 1980s in the horror genre. Yeah, Friday the 13th takes it to the next level, and it's a solid film in its own right. It is a little cheesy at points, it is a little slow, but it does build up, and ultimately it's a good slasher film. If you're looking for an Oscar-worthy type of movie or a drama or just something with a lot of good acting, you're not going to find it here. But if you're looking for a good B-movie, a good slasher film, then Friday the 13th is your bet. Even though it's not the best Friday the 13th film, not the strongest in the series, doesn't have Jason, it is a solid film in its own right, and it deserves at least one viewing if you have never seen the Friday the 13th films and you want to see where it started. Yeah, you get a lot of actors in here. You have Betsy Palmer as Mrs. Voorhees. She just does an incredible job. She is batshit crazy. She's just psycho. You even get younger Kevin Bacon in this, and yeah, the deaths, it's very gory. Now, a lot of it is pretty cool. They do a lot of like point of view type of sequences that you later on see in later horror films. So it kind of does have that like 1950s horror film quality. Much like Halloween, there's a lot of point of view shots, but just a lot more gore. It's very, very gory. And Tom Savini, as the special effects makeup person, did a fantastic job. The producers got him on board. He was one of the earliest people to be on board after his effects in Dawn of the Dead. And he does an amazing job here. Yeah, there's some just gory deaths. I mean, it's pretty bad, man. It's pretty bad. Other than that, the characters are very two-dimensional. You're just waiting for them to get slashed off. They just mostly screw around a lot, run around naked, and just are scared. So, like, really, you're just waiting for each of them to be hunted down one by one as the film progresses. It does feel a bit low budget. It is a little bit cheap, but it adds a certain type of grittiness to it. The beginning's a little slow. There's certain characters that get killed off that you're not expecting to be killed off, and you get to know these camp counselors. They're trying to reopen Camp Crystal Lake, and again, the boy who drowned there was Mrs. Voorhees' child, Jason, and she's taking it out on them. And that's one thing I have to say about this is that at first you don't really know it's her, so the fact that she's going after them is a brilliant twist in itself. So if you haven't seen the film, I apologize for giving it away, but if you have seen the film, you know Mrs. Voorhees is the original killer. And yeah, it's just something scary about a woman with a knife just going after people. The third act does have a chase sequence that does kind of go longer than it should have. I mean, she almost gets knocked out like at least 3 times, and the main character doesn't do anything. They just keep getting up, and I'm like, you should try to hit her on the head or kill her. The killer's been knocked out 3 times, and it just keeps going and going and going until the end, where I feel like it could have been shortened up. I know they did that as for scares, did that for suspense, but after a while you're just like, okay, come on. But it was still very early in the horror genre game of the 1980s. This is before Nightmare on Elm Street, and it's right after Halloween, and before Halloween 2. So this is really the one to just replicate Halloween like many other horror films did during that decade, and just take it to another level that we haven't seen before. It's less like an Alfred Hitchcock movie and more like the slasher films we would later on see progress throughout the decade. Overall, I think it's a solid film. I'm not the biggest fan of this installment. I like Friday the 13th Part 3 the best, where Jason gets the hockey mask and it's in 3D with Crispin Glover, but it is a solid film in its own right, and it's not the best movie, but it's not entirely the worst movie either. It's just in the middle. So if you have a night where you're off, you want to watch some popcorn, have a date night, watch a scary movie, and you want to watch something older, put on Friday the 13th. It's a solid film for what it is, and I give it a 3 out of 5. Friday the 13th does make the final cut in my opinion. One of the most prominent horror franchises around besides Freddy and Michael Myers, so yeah. Overall, the cons, the acting is a bit cheesy. It's not the best, but hey, it's a slasher film. And then some of the pacing just around, you're just waiting for the characters to be killed. They're too two-dimensional. But pros. Pros, the cinematography is great, the score, Betsy Palmer as Mrs. Voorhees is just insane. And who could forget that ending? Oh my god, it like got dark here when I started talking about this ending. She's like knocked out, she's in the hospital, but then there's that ending where you see Jason's like body. It was just scary. That scared the shit out of me. There's certain moments that are scary and kind of meh, but that's one scene at the end where you're just like, oh my god, that just came out of nowhere. Anyway, those are the pros and cons. A 3 out of 5, and Friday the 13th does make the final cut. So, if you haven't seen it, go check it out and go check out the rest of the series. It's so solid in its own right if you like slasher horror films. And if you have seen it, let me know what your favorite part of the movie is and what your favorite Friday the 13th is. Mine's probably Part 3. I like Part 3 a lot. And plus Jason gets a hockey mask. Anyway, that is it for this episode of The Final Cut. Here's to 40 more reviews. If you like this video, click the like button, comment, and subscribe for more videos.